Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected to sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rails 1100 and sorry, I just lost my script. Oh no. 1194th New Social Environment. I'm Magali, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Friedrich Petzel and Lilly Wei. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Friedrich Petzel is the founder of Petzel in Chelsea, New York, representing over 40 international artists and estates. Engaged in both primary and secondary markets, Petzel has nurtured the careers of some of today's most influential artists. He also co-operates Capitain Petzel at a gallery in Berlin with Gisela Capitain. And our host today, Lilly Wei, is a New York-based art critic, writer, independent curator, and journalist whose primary interest is global contemporary art and has written for dozens of publications here and abroad. And with that, I will hand it over to Lilly to get us started.
Okay. Thank you, Magali, for the introduction, and welcome, Friedrich. You're on the firing line? No.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Anyway, let's go back let's go back to your beginning, but let's talk a bit about your background and experience. So you founded Petzel in New York in 1994. So that makes you a little over what, 30 years in New York in the gallery. So
Yeah.
how did you start? Um, I see you studied art history, so could we talk a little bit about your beginnings?
Yeah, I mean, I had the privilege to grow up in Cologne. I was not born in Cologne, but I had the privilege to be there at the time when Cologne was a certain magnet for a lot of, European, but also American artists.
Hmm.
And I really didn't know what to do with myself. I always had an interest in art. Um, but I mean, there was no particular kind of guide rail how to become a professional. I don't know what curator. I didn't know what that word meant. I mean, I remember being a kid. My parents always dropped me in museums. I looked at a lot of things over the years, mostly older art. And then in the 80s, all of a sudden, I became friendly with some of the living artists in Cologne at that time, the Mülheimer Freiheit, Walter Dahn, Dokopil, but then also soon enough, Martin Kippenberger, Sigmar Polke, and some of those folks. And I remember at the time I needed, being an art history student, I didn't have any money, basically. My parents supported a certain part of it, but I had to get jobs. And Martin Kippenberger at some point said, there's a young lady, her name is Gisela Capitain, she's going to open a gallery. And you may want to do an introduce yourself, maybe you get a job. I've never been to a commercial gallery in my life until then. I must have been, what, 21 or so. I introduced myself, and then Gisela was then opening her new gallery with a young artist at that time, Heimo Sobernik, and asked me to kind of run around with like glasses of white wine at the opening. And I failed miserably at that job. So those were the beginnings, but honestly, I met through the experience working in the afternoons at Capitain Gallery. I met a lot of artists that then later helped me in New York, like Bob Gober, Jeff Koons, Cindy Sherman. I met a lot of people at that time. And when I finished my studies and I tried to finish my PhD, actually, I was on a grant to come to the United States. And again, I needed jobs. I needed some kind of source of income. And so I worked for an art consultant. Her name is Thea Westreich, who has been extremely supportive of my interest in art, but also my interest in books and art history. So that's how the whole thing got started. And then I was hired away by Metro Pictures, and that was a huge career-making decision, because then I realized maybe I should not work in a museum or become an art professor. Maybe I should actually pursue the idea of working in a gallery properly, not just as a job, not as an afternoon job. I mean, that's how the whole thing kind of got started in a way.
Um, just as a question, so what was your area of study?
17th century. I mean, mostly 17th century
Interesting.
Italian art. I knew nothing about contemporary art, really. I mean, maybe Yves Klein and Joseph Beuys,
Mm.
but I mean, very limited. And then I went into hyper overdrive once I met living artists like Polka and things, and artists like that, I'm a quick study, so I really kind of immersed myself at that time, but I was not particularly drawn to contemporary art until much later, I would say in my mid-20s or so.
And then you have said, I mean, that you find that, well, you have a sense of the history of contemporary art of a certain period, and you also have your art historical background, and you have talked about how, should we say, the young artists coming up don't have that sense of history, which you think is important. But would you like to talk about that a little?
I mean, everybody can pursue. I mean, I don't have a particular opinion. I mean, for me, it's extremely important, and it has guided. I mean, my experience in the art history department has guided some of the decisions of how to select artists, maybe for the program here at Petzel Gallery.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that that's the model that should, should work for each and everyone. For me, it was extremely important, especially when it comes to the history of painting and these questions. My thesis at the time that I wanted to pursue was the rhetorics of painting. Can a painting be a rhetorical device? Can a painting express the opposite of what it represents? If you follow me on that. So can a painting look like something but tries to make an argument about for the opposite of what it shows? And that is a question that had always interested me over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it probably indirectly or directly influenced my decision sometimes what painters I'd like to show here. Whether they're from Europe or America, it doesn't really matter. Or in this case, behind me is Xi Nanjing, a painter from Beijing, who actually read some stuff that I published over the years. And that's how the friendship developed. So it had to do a little bit with that art historical background, I guess.
So then, how do you see your role as a dealer?
Well, I guess it's a bit of a cliche, but we build a platform for, I think some of the most extraordinary artists of our times to have a platform, the platform to speak from, and to augment that argument and, be tighter and tighter about the arguments that we want to make, and therefore also obviously has economic significance and so forth that these artists expect from me to perform in a particular way that allows them to kind of advance their interests, to, contribute to a certain standard of living and so on. But at the end of the day, and at the very beginning, it's about setting up a platform for an argument. I look at art as an argument for something, maybe sometimes against something, but an argument for a particular thought, a visual thought, I guess. Yeah. So for me, this whole experience of art history has been important. Funny enough, now I'm 62 years old. I look a lot back at, older art these days.
So you had just said that that you look for art that is the opposite of what it is showing, and you asked, if I knew what that meant. I think I do, but would you like to elaborate a little? I like the comment, but
well, it came from a conversation I had with Polke when I was a kid. He always said that he was really annoyed by the fact that people had said that I'm making ironic paintings. Friedrich, I've never made an ironic painting in my life. So how does it come that people looked at him as an ironic, that these pictures, that these paintings that he made were read as ironic commentaries to something? And he always said, no, it's not. So it kind of followed my I don't know, my pursuit in looking at art. Is this artist serious when he puts that on canvas? What does it mean, basically? How do you read this? I know how a sentence functions. I know how a poem works, but how does a painting that freezes a particular moment in time, how do rhetorics function in that department? From Courbet through Picabia, Magritte's period Vache to David Sally, Polke, and Martin Kippenberger, all these conversations that artists had amongst themselves with art critics in their times, that became kind of important to me. and it still is to some extent.
Um, do you think your point of view is a little bit different than, shall we say, American art dealers?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I have wonderful colleagues in my field, and we talk about all kinds of things, but maybe not that particular
Yeah.
subject matter. Um, but when I talk to artists in their studios, I mean, this is actually always leading to some interesting agreements or disagreements. It always is a nice way of making my position maybe a little more clear.
Hmm.
But I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. Everything I wrote like 30 something years ago is, in my mind, complete bullshit. I was naive when I started that thesis. I think over the years I learned a lot more to it. But I mean, the subject matter in and of itself is still quite interesting to me.
Well, I mean, it not have been particularly bullshit. It may have been something you have evolved from as a
Yeah.
foundation,
Yeah.
and things have changed everywhere. But
Yeah.
what in terms of the artists and their careers, how do you nurture that? How do you help develop that? What do you think your role in that is?
Well, I guess it comes up first with the selection process. It's like, I mean, a lot of these questions often come like when I do have a talk or somewhere, people ask, how do you get a gallery? How do you select an artist?
Yeah.
And I think it's the most important point I can make about that is like, I don't want to understand what I'm looking at when I'm looking at it for the first time. I'm interested in things in any field, whether it's music or visual art or literature. I do not want to fully comprehend what I'm experiencing here. So it's more a process. And when you select to work or when you ask an artist to join the gallery, for me at least, it's the question, will this particular position, and not only entertain is the wrong word, but will it keep my curiosity active for 15, 20 years? Because it is kind of a marriage. When you start working with artists, it's not like a one-time or a one-night stand. You want to have a conversation with that particular artist over many, many, many years. And often I come into an art show or I come to a studio and I feel like, oh, I kind of fully understand what this person is after. Then I'm not the right gallery for that. It's not I wouldn't want to pursue this particular position because I feel like I know it already. At least instinctively. I'm not saying I'm not gone, but I want to have I want to have that experience of being slightly alienated, slightly put off even,
Mm.
and a little bit left behind. And so my job then would be, when I started working with Jorge Pardo, for example, we had a massive argument before we even started working together because he accused me of being an old Marxist, from that German mold. And he was very clear about his positions. And, we started on the wrong or the right foot, however you want to put that, because we actually had a subject matter to debate. And through our friendship and exhibitions and, 30-year of history now, I think we both understand each other way better. And I think this gallery was able to help Jorge to articulate his wishes and wants. And so we accompanied these wishes, but I learned a lot from him. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but in terms of long-term relationships, uh, is that a norm? I mean, should I not ask? I mean, maybe, I mean, you tend to you tend to do that. Your artists are with you for quite a while.
Yeah.
That's a question because these days, that kind of relationship, while of course it's there, is maybe, it's as things change, as artists' careers go into different, I don't know, stratospheres or different levels, sometimes, what about loyalties? How does that work? Or, what do you think is,
Well, I think, a gallery sometimes a gallery can only help an artist for such a period of time, and then maybe this has, the possibilities of extending that help have exasperated, or we're not helpful enough to one another any longer, and then a relationship should stop. I think it's not the norm necessarily to kind of stick it out for decades if the gallery can't perform, if the gallery cannot advance the artist's wishes. An artist has the liberty and should have the liberty to move to another spot. I value loyalty and all those things around it, but also honestly, sometimes the gallery hasn't been able to grow with the artist, but also the other way around. Sometimes an artist has not really fulfilled the potential of what me or my team had seen there. So, this idea of an artist having to have a endless loyalty to his or her dealer, I think is a bit like an older model. I see it in sports, when I'm a big fan of football, and if you want to play in the Champions League, you may sometimes have to change course. You may have to change and go to a different team. Does that make sense to you? Sorry, I'm talking in riddles, maybe.
No, I mean, so then, so here's that question then. So how do you choose the artists you represent? I mean, how do you?
I'll give you an example. I think that speaks for itself. I mean, when I started my gallery, I was really in my loft. During the day, I still worked for Metro Pictures, and the evenings I had my little like apartment gallery on Broadway. A friend of mine said like there's this young woman who's opening her salon, similar to what you do, and her name is Nicola Tyson. I went there. I couldn't understand what she was doing. She showed her own paintings, and there came from a perspective of a queer artist making woman that actually makes paintings. Now that was a time in 91, 92 where painting was not very strong in the first place. Women were not even contemplated to participate in this whole field, maybe with one or two exceptions, obviously. And I felt somehow something I couldn't comprehend. I felt I saw something new. And I asked her to join my gallery if I ever opened one, and I did. And that she was one of the first artists. And then the second is like Nicola then actually said to me, I like an artist called Maria Lasnik, but we never see Maria Lasnik in America. So maybe you know her. Can you go there? Can you ask her to join the gallery? And so I did this for 3 or 4 years, and she ended up joining. But when I saw the work, Maria's, again, from a hetero male perspective, these pictures were quite opaque to me, to say it politely. But I knew there was something extraordinary there. It's absolutely extraordinary. A language that was absolutely only hers. There was no one in the world that did anything like her. So my challenge, or the challenge to me, was then to convince an American audience to look at that language and see that there's some merit. And it worked. I mean, people embraced her career and her work. And over the years, she became a force, no?
Yeah.
But it was not from a position of knowledge. It was not from a position of being the educated whatever person. It was as foreign to me as to most of my audience, but I knew it was a language that was super unique and needed to be heard and seen.
So is that one of your roles then? I mean, is it just the sense you have? I mean, what characteristics do you think might define the artists that you do represent, or that, that represent your gallery as well as you representing them?
I mean, I think if I look at the program with obviously some exceptions, there's a little bit of a consensus of solipsistic behavior, of being absolutely unique and alone, without many connectivity points. I mean, I don't show movements. Don't show a group of artists that look alike. I think Charlene von Heil's paintings, I should be precise. Now there are way more artists who make abstract paintings, but Charlene again looks at each and every canvas as its own frame of reference and consequences that come from certain premises. that's why each and every painting looks different. You know, there's no signature style that Charlene von Heil employs. And that challenge is the challenge that interested me following her work and hopefully helping her still to develop an audience. So there is no consensus, only that I think I have a tendency to look at artists who are quite unique in their own way of framing their identity, their language. But that could be, I mean, and then one doesn't look like the other because you can't have that as a movement, right? So I guess these artists do all the things I would be as a human being. I'd be too afraid to do for myself or to employ myself. I'm drawn to artists who have a lot of courage employing or to articulate their own identity and language.
So just to go back a little bit, because either you said it before, or we talked about it a little before the talk began, but you were saying that you didn't feel that you ever wanted to be an artist. You wanted to help. I mean, you wanted to, present them, promote them, produce them, whatever. Was that just always that way, or
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I remember vividly when I was a kid, like I don't have enough talent to really play the guitar on the level I I wanted to. I can draw quite well, but I'm not good enough. And I think if I had pursued an artist career, I would be one of these horrible, academic artists who try to illustrate an idea.
Mm.
And that's not art. That's righteousness. That is, I don't know what. I mean, it's just totally boring, I think. So I saw myself now I can laugh about that stuff. I think when I was 17, I didn't think that was funny at all. I was humiliated.
We're all humiliated at 17, you know.
No, I remember I was 17. I really remember when I sat in a train on the way to school and I thought like, Petzel, this is it. You're not good enough. And then, no, I really remember this vividly.
Well, you came to it early enough to do.
Yeah, better not become an art dealer at 40 or something like this. No. It's like I said, like it's funny maybe today. At that time, it was shit. I want to be an artist. I want to be I don't know, John Lennon. I want to be whatever, John Updike. But I'm not, that's not my role. I think would have been a decent publisher. I would have been a good music producer. And hopefully I'm an okay art dealer, but it's always like one step removed from the stage, so to speak.
Yeah, well, so not everybody, as sometimes people like to think, or artists like to think, are not failed artists. They happen to want to do something else, or they
Right.
know they're better at it. But you talked about the experimental spirit of your gallery.
Mhm.
Is that not a norm, or could you talk about that? I mean, in terms of how you define experimental, or what you look for as experimental, what you consider experimental?
Well, that's a long question. That's a larger question. Experimental. I'm not saying experimental in this. I don't think a gallery
Yeah.
should be the platform to. I mean, once the work comes into the gallery, the experiment has not come to a conclusion, but there has to be a certain kind of manifest clarity about the work before it enters the commercial realm. But the gallery, by the time when you still develop a program and develop an artist, as a dealer or as a critical voice, you do participate to some extent with the artist and in his or her studio to clarify certain arguments, right? So yeah, this is a very complicated question because I think we show a lot of art that has still experimental nature, has an experimental nature, but I am a formalist, a closet formalist. I do think once the work arrives in this particular gallery, there has to be a level of clarification.
So maybe the question could be then, what do you think your gallery's particular strengths are? how is it distinguished from other galleries, perhaps?
Uh, um, hmm, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think of other galleries so much. I think of, is this still interesting to me? Is it interesting to my public? To show, you see on the screen right now these wood prints. I've never showed, I'm not a print expert. I have no understanding about the history of print, only like, very schematically. But I saw that these two artists work on something that I didn't see anywhere else. And they built actually the largest wood print press, to my knowledge, in Long Island City.
Yeah.
And the subject matter appealed to me. I thought it had a political significance today. And so we first showed them uptown, and then we now show them in Chelsea. The part that you mentioned in terms of experimentation is such that, do I know whether I have an audience for wood prints? I didn't know that. I found out in the Uptown show that we actually do have an audience as long as the work is excellent and formally coherent and politically relevant. But that's the experiment. I never showed prints in my life before. I don't know if that makes sense here. I'm not sure if that.
So then perhaps it's time to show prints. But you want to talk about real estate for a minute, everyone's favorite topic. But you've been in your new space, well, your space now for since 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess.
And so how has that affected you? What are some of the upsides of the change, or?
The upside was that we, in 18th Street and the older space, we couldn't do 2 or 3 gallery programs at once. It was a large gallery, but it didn't allow for 2 positions to be exhibited at once. That's the picture. Now we can do this because we have the so-called West Gallery currently with paintings by Emma Webster, who is still a young artist out of Los Angeles. In the 18th Street Gallery, we couldn't do this. We had a hard time introducing a younger, super talented artist to the program. And now on 25th Street, I have that flexibility to do 2, if not 3 shows at once. So that has really changed a bit how we operate here. Also, we have a sculpture garden on that rooftop there that you see that allows us to do parties here. We have receptions, we have book signings, we have all kinds of events here. And again, on 18th Street, that wasn't possible. So that has really impacted how we try to keep the gallery relevant, and also the older artists, the so-called blue chip artists, relevant by introducing always younger talents to the program, doing things concurrently. What else? We have better offices. We have more viewing rooms, private viewing rooms in the back. A lot of things, a lot of perks that we didn't have on 18th Street. It's a positive change.
And how are you connected with Capitain Petzel? I mean, what kind of programming? Is there a connection there?
There are a lot of connections. Yeah, I mean, like I said, my first job was with Gisela almost 40 years ago. Now we're entering our 40th year together. But we opened that gallery in 2008, about 3 weeks after the Lehman Brothers catastrophe. So again, perfect timing, because I think we probably didn't sell anything for like 6 months or so. But the thought behind opening that space and also that area there with Karl Marx Allee, all the galleries we have here in Chelsea, they have no particular history other than being mechanical shops or whatnot else, at some point garages. That gallery that space in Berlin is on Karl Marx Allee, where in the 70s still I saw tanks, Russian tanks, going up and down. It is politically extremely charged. This was actually a museum during the DDR or GDR, and the museum showed more like applied arts from their friends in Cuba and Budapest and whatnot else. So Soviet-related artifacts. And I like the idea that these places here, these like Gluckman type of architecture buildings that we occupy in Chelsea have zero history, and everything you in Berlin had is so charged with, multiple histories at once. So especially American artists were really intrigued showing in that space in Berlin.
And then what about this notion of so many multiple galleries within the same city? As the gallery scene kinds of shifts, that it's like right now, a lot of people are certainly going back downtown. And do you think there is a limit on how many galleries one needs, or would you consider opening up another space at some point, or what do you think that might?
I can't speak for others. I mean, some people need to have 15, 16 or more galleries all over the place. I don't. I mean, but I would never want to make decisions for or against other people. It doesn't interest me. I think the problem for me, for me, opening a gallery in Paris or in London wouldn't interest me only because it's not any different. You know what I'm saying? It's like it would just like add to more travel and more opening dinners and this and that, but it wouldn't be a challenge for me to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. I would just do the same thing in Paris or the same thing in London. And no, I'm not going to in the near future, unless my kids wanted to take over, my staff want to take on another gallery space. I'm not particularly interested in perpetuating the same type of practice I already do here and in Berlin.
So would you say you were a hands-on dealer? I mean, you are engaged in each of your artists. You have about what, 47 plus artists in your gallery at the moment, including estates. Is,
I,
is, is that a good number to handle?
I mean, that's something I can handle. I mean, again, like, don't overestimate my job here. It's like I have a fantastic team
Yeah.
that works here and that has been sometimes working here for like 25 or 30 years almost.
Mhm.
This gallery would not function without their incredible support and help and expertise. So we can handle this. If I wanted to open a gallery in Hong Kong or somewhere else, I would probably have to add at least 10, 15 more artists and hire another 10 or 15 people. And this is okay, but
Mhm.
not for me. So at this point in my life. So it doesn't interest me if I would rather do, I don't know, consult a museum maybe with, rearranging their collection or things like that would interest me. That's new. The gallery is normally not allowed to pursue these types of dreams, but that would interest me. But to another gallery, the same scope of this doesn't, what is it going to do?
Well, with even the number of artists you have, how do you see their exhibition rotation? I mean, how does that?
Well, now it's much easier again because I have these
Yeah.
2 or 3 different spaces. So I remember having conversations with some of my artists that all of a sudden they had to wait for like 4 or 5 years to return to the big space on 18th Street. And that became prohibited. I mean, it wasn't really that good. So here I can now do, with the spaces I have now, I can do like 2 years, something like that, maybe 2.5. And if somebody has a wonderful idea, like Emily May Smith has a fantastic painting, and we do a show for 1 week in one of the ground floor spaces. We have at the moment Ross Bleckner in the third space, also an exhibition open only for 1 week in commemoration of his friendship with Cy Twombly. Those are interesting. This is fun. I've never tried to do a show for 1 week, but actually it works and it brings a lot of art historians here and collectors. And instead of being in Hong Kong at an art fair, we have actually a fantastic RSVP list for Saturday with an art historian speaking on Ross's paintings.
Oh, that sounds terrific. That's a certain kind of flexibility, right? That I mean, the time of exhibitions are, I think, always a bit of a question. Sometimes they're just too short, it seems. Sometimes they're just too long. I mean, and I guess to be able to, change it up is important. So I don't know what's going on behind me. I hope it's not bothering anyone else, but they're doing some kind of construction here.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so perhaps you could tell me a little bit about how you think the art world has changed in the 30 years you've been here or more. I think you said you weren't that interested in the art world, but still, you have to, you've certainly seen, I think, some major shifts. Would you like to elaborate a little? Would you tell me what you think?
Well, I mean, it's everything is a little bit in question right now, but I'm on my generation, so to speak. I'm 60 years old or whatever, and a lot of us started our galleries in the early 90s as a result of a major financial crisis. It opened up possibilities for us to show artists that were maybe not part of the norm, so to speak. And it was a much, much smaller art world also. So I think over the years, what I remember, it was still kind of a novelty if you started showing people like Nicola Tyson or Felix Gonzalez Torres, people from a different kind of cultural background than what the chauvinist, male, heterosexist community normally allowed. So in that respect, I think we see a much more global and international art world that developed since the early to mid 90s. Those are the good news. I mean, this was a small little club up until, Andrea Rosen started her gallery with Felix and Sean and John Curran and whatnot else. I mean, this was exciting at that time. And like I said, Jorge Pardo became an artist, or Orozco started showing with Goodman and so on. I mean, things became a bit more open and less constricted in my mind. So I guess I'm the child of a certain kind of idea of globalization in the art world that I full-heartedly support, and it became way more interesting in terms of now me showing Xi Nanjing, the Chinese painter behind me. I wouldn't have contemplated this in the 90s, no, or in the 80s for sure not. Everything has changed in that respect for the better. The museums have opened up to positions that they didn't contemplate for decades. I mean, we're not talking. I don't want to get into this whole racist argument. What institutions in this country in particular, but also in Europe, have done or didn't do. I think the galleries have contributed a lot. The commercial gallery system has contributed a lot to the fact that the museum world had to open up over the last 15, 20 years. So those are the good news. What is the bad news? I don't know. It became a little bit all the same, now our collectors have told me over the years that if you do 15 art fairs a year and still try to promote one particular painting as absolutely unique and cannot be replicated or reproduced, it's the one and only, and then you do another fair 2 months later and you say the same thing, it's like at some point we are not trustworthy anymore. So we have to, I mean, I don't want to speak to anyone else, but I think that my job is to really kind of introduce or reintroduce artists and try to make it a bit special again, try to go away from that model of ubiquity and universal presence, and introduce people again to, when I talk about the Bleckner show downstairs, it's almost like a studio visit. There's a certain kind of intimacy in the room. There's also a certain kind of intimacy and so forth that it's not going to be up for like 6 weeks. You come, you sign up, you look at it, you like it, you don't, whatever. That's I think our job for the time being. I don't know if it's going to be like this for 10 years, but at the moment, I think I'm quite optimistic in the department of getting people back into the gallery and look at stuff. And they do come, I can tell you. You just have to try it. You have to work a little bit harder
on it. I mean, yeah, I would think that the audiences had kind of disappeared during the pandemic, at least live audiences. So the kinds of, well, I don't know. So they're coming back now, you're saying. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. And we have to understand, it's like, we are showmen. I mean, it's about the show. But whether you do the show, I mean, we are privileged because we are in New York. In New York, you have an audience. If I couldn't say any of the things I just said if I had a gallery in Marseille. But here we have an audience. We have an amazing audience from collectors, artists, critics, historians, museum folks, and stuff. So we can, by doing a better programming, a better, more thoughtful, more thoughtful programming, we get an audience back into the gallery that may have lost faith a bit because they think, oh, Petzel is always on a plane to, I don't know, Beijing, Hong Kong, New Delhi, whatnot else. It's actually more fun right now, I have to say. It's like, everybody talks about crisis. It's also a little bit more fun right now.
How many art fairs do you do a year?
Now we're down to 2 Basel fairs and 1 ADAA fair, the one up at the Park Avenue.
And at the maximum?
Well, we wanna go back to I never did more than 2 most of the years anyway. And then slightly before the pandemic, we ended up also doing Seoul and Los Angeles and Hong Kong and all of those things. It became a bit, a little bit boring because it's redundant, it's repetitive, it's always the same. We will go back to Hong Kong, definitely not this year, but at some point because we have a large audience over in Asia. But this year we didn't feel, we want to see if we can actually operate as a proper gallery with a proper programming without all these perks, without this extra fluff. And it works quite well.
But it does get a little complicated with the unsettled state of geopolitics, don't you think? It's like you're never sure exactly what's going to be. Like Seoul was such a draw, and then now they're in their own kind of political crisis. So
yeah.
How does that
it had no particular kind of significance to us, the political crisis.
Yeah.
But we just felt like at the moment, I would like to introduce, maybe we have to, the audience also in some of those different cultures, whether it's Los Angeles or in Europe even, have to do a little bit better job for education, to kind of show that art, proper artists are not only the ones that sell at the last Phillips Day sale for millions of dollars. There is a much, much larger vision, maybe what this gallery can provide you with. And that requires a bit more introduction talks, books that we publish. Things like this. An art fair at the moment in, I don't know what, Bangladesh. I make this stuff up, right? It doesn't help so much. Yes, I make a few more sales, but it doesn't help the general kind of climate of what contemporary art should and can look like. It's putting a Band-Aid on education, maybe.
But if it's in Bangladesh and you get to see some Bangladeshi artists that, might be.
Yeah, but I can do this on my own. I don't have to do an art. It costs me $40,000 to get to it. That's the argument that I heard a lot. It's like, but then you learn a lot about this and that. No, you can do this on your own time. If my staff wants to go to, I don't know, Buenos Aires, I don't have to do it with an art fair. They can just go there for a week and inform themselves and then later me of what's actually going on there. But an art fair is not going to be very helpful because the objective is to sell as much as you can in 4 days.
I guess so. I think it's enough. One of the objectives is to introduce, however, artists to the world. Sort of like, a version maybe of Martin Kippenberger's MetroNet, just everywhere.
Yeah, that was a wonderful.
That's such an idealistic thing that we can be all connected. We just have to go down in the subway and there we are. But anyway, just as another, I guess, quick question, if the interest is shifting toward the Middle East, are you keeping an eye on that or?
Not particularly, no.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. And I think I basically asked you, but I'm just curious about the scale of your gallery, that you don't have ambitions to make it unless it organically grows that way into a mega gallery.
I'm not mega. I'm not. If somebody here in the gallery, I leave that to my team. If they want to do mega,
yeah, right.
But they have to have a good business plan of how to mega themselves. But I'm not going to be in the forefront and say like, now you're going to, you're going to run the Asia Gallery or something. No, no. But if they had a good idea and a business plan, I'm not against anything. I'm just for a particular, provision. They have to understand what it is that they're after. It's not, I think I said this before, it's not about myself and my vision and my whatnot else. It's about, can the team grow this thing to a level that they think would be more beneficial to the artist? Go be my guest, go for it. Fine, we have the money, we can do it. But it has to have a good backup plan, a good plan, not just for ego reasons. I'm going to be all over the place. And then I have to travel there eventually. No, I'm not doing that.
So I had talked to a number of artists in the past. Well, I don't know what, I mean, just because I wanted to specifically ask them about questions that they might, have for like a dealer. And I'm sure a lot of the audience here will be artists too. And but I guess the consensus was basically um, that how do you like so how do you have your eyes focused on the artist, on I guess on their well-being? Would you show artists that aren't so commercially viable and then balance them off with artists that are? I mean, how do you think about that? How do you balance that?
Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't really understand the question.
Well,
So,
like if you're a publisher, for example, you will publish what you consider a prestige book that will not sell that much to,
mhm.
and then you will try to publish a bestseller, right? So does that kind of thinking, affect some of your choices, or just in terms of keeping the gallery viable, because it has to be viable also.
Well, first of all, I would be a much better artist if I could always, basically calculate what's going to be a bestseller and what isn't.
Right. Yes.
Um, I honestly don't I mean, most of the time I'm surprised if things really, develop in a way that you can say this is economic success. I'm also sometimes surprised that a great exhibition is not finding its audience. Um, Historically speaking, I would say that a gallery wants to not rely on one or two artists that are super successful. You want to rely on a group of 7 to 10 artists who are equally successful, and that group changes all the time. It changes every couple of years. That someone who has been extremely successful for yada 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 yada, and then maybe for a while falls out of fashion. But then a good gallery that's the time when a gallery like mine needs to purchase work on the secondary market, maybe do exhibitions that are more historical, where I can um, show work from, I don't know, the early 80s of Alan McCullum's or whatnot else. And that's actually, there's huge opportunities revisiting an artist's earlier work and do a show with that stuff. Um, you never know. I mean, this is really a speculative job and so forth, that you have to trust that artist that you started working with, and you need to also clear it up with the artist that, your ascendance to mega stardom may not always continue. There are moments where your career might stagger to some extent. So that opportunity then to maintain that relationship and maybe publish a book that kind of exemplifies certain kind of aspects of the earlier work and so on, that makes a good gallery in my mind. I don't know if I answered your question.
So, well, yes. Um, so in terms of artists that have sort of fallen by the way, and there seems to be a great interest in those kinds of artists recently, and also I think a great interest in his states. Where do you stand on that?
Um, well, I had the conversation with a very prominent art advisor the other day. So just because an artist has been forgotten in the 1980s doesn't make him or her any more significant 40 years later. So there's a little bit overemphasis on that thing. And I go a lot to, when I do go through galleries and I see like, oh, this person was forgotten for whatever reason. It's not always true. No, I mean, some artists, or some works are just not as significant as others, and there was maybe a reason why an artist didn't make it. Anyhow, I like the idea, and I think we did a lot with artists that had been a little forgotten, like Maria Lasnik. She was really not a well-known character artist here in America. But then it became an ism. All of a sudden, everybody feels like we have to do it. I wouldn't want to show 12 Maria Lasniks, right? I mean, this is A, they don't exist, and B, that gallery, it becomes like a historicizing type of force for an expertise that I didn't accompany at the time. So, I mean, I don't want to do that. But if something comes my way where I feel like, wow, this is something I want the public to recognize that stuff, I'm on for it. But yes, I show quite a number of artists who may have had their limelights at some point, and then, if that artist has a fantastic idea, we publish a book, we're doing maybe a museum exhibition with someone else in collaboration, and then we host an exhibition downstairs. But this is more like a question of instinct and timing.
So, it was well, maybe it was a myth. I don't think so. Actually, it did happen, right? That in the 80s, artists could actually just walk in off the streets, and occasionally they would be embraced. Um, would you have ever considered anybody walking in off the street?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, the circumstances are so different. Let's not fool ourselves. This has become an art industry, and all the changes we experience here in the art world are the ones that we experience in the publishing world and in fashion. I mean, bigger houses buy up smaller houses and whatnot else, and then the investment company comes in and buys all of it. So, I mean, no. I mean, this idea of coming off the street and become no. There are too many channels that need to be. At least this would not be my gallery. It may happen with other venues, but not my gallery can't do that.
So, so it isn't even like how you get to Carnegie Hall by practicing.
Well, for everyone who actually does have that Carnegie Hall, I mean, I kind of know where you're going with that, but the Carnegie Hall is. I would say this is the beauty about the art world also. There are a number of fantastic smaller galleries, whether they're in Tribeca or in other places, that do that job for us. I mean, and if it comes to that moment where that artist then, built up a certain repertoire, that's a time where my gallery can partner up maybe with someone, but you can't just do this off the street. That's economically not possible.
So then, what advice might you give to an artist starting out or emerging artist or one who needs to be rediscovered or
I honestly don't know. I mean, I think work in your own community, first of all. I mean, New York is special, I mean, we're talking about like as if Cleveland was the same as New York. If you are an artist and you have graduated and moved to Detroit, you may have you make a particular decision. I mean, if you then move to New York or to Los Angeles, you make a different decision. So, I mean, these are not questions a gallery like mine can answer. It's about your location. It's about your networking with like-minded artists, not galleries necessarily, but artists, writers, community stuff. And if that accelerates to some kind of a voice that people like myself pick up, great. But I think a lot of years might pass by until I pick it up. And I'm doing this for too long now to pretend I have my voice on the ground, so to speak, and I know everything that's happening in Greenport. I don't know. Greenpoint, sorry.
Yeah, well, okay. Do you think, well, thank you. Could we, hello, Natalie? Yes. Thank you so much, Friedrich. That was
Pleasure.
informative. I didn't ask you about corporatization, but I guess we could say that for another time. I mean,
Corporatization?
well, I could ask that if the art world has, become like seen wholly formed now on a corporate model.
Well, certainly, I mean, the elements, I think, to all of us, we had to shape up a little bit, no? Because, I mean, the stories that older artists have told me of the years where, okay, there's no corporate structure maybe, but I never got paid or things like this, or I got paid in a plastic bag and I had to shut up. I mean, those things are just not cool. They were never cool then. They're certainly not working today. So a level of professionalization was probably necessary and is still necessary. Um, I think that, yeah, ex negativo, I would say I run a corporate-like gallery too.
Okay. Okay, again, thank you so much. Magali,
Yes,
oh,
thank
you
you both so much.
might have questions. So, yeah.
We have a few questions from the audience. The first one is from Bettina Funk, and Bettina says, how do you and have over the last 20 years negotiate the global reach and demand on contemporary art as it meets the need to be part of a local culture, as a gallery, as a person, as a liaison to your artist?
Whoa, Bettina, that's a that's a bigger one. Can you read? I mean, so what is? I have to start somewhere here with this. The global need. Can you repeat that quickly? Like,
Chloe just posted it in the chat. But how do you and have over the last 20 years negotiated the global reach and demand on contemporary art as it meets the need to be part of a local culture?
oh my God, I think that I cannot say that I had that me or my team had a particular plan of how to reach. I mean, we certainly started when the art fair model was not as ridiculous as it is today. We did slowly kind of approach the idea of showing certain artists that we felt were not represented yet in Asia, for example, or enough in Europe. We started kind of working on that a little bit better. But the global reach, I can't really answer this in a coherent fashion. I think we kind of, there was not enough maybe planning in the way we did this. I mean, I can rely a little bit on my colleagues in various different cultures to kind of, I try to build bridges with colleagues in various different cultures to eventually exhibit my artists because they have a certain expertise here and there. But hmm, I don't have a coherent answer, Bettina. Sorry.
Thank you for that question, Bettina. The next question is from MP Olson, and they say, I understand you tend to have long-term relationships with your artists. Do you take on artists at different stages of their careers as well, driven primarily by your sense of aesthetics and concerns for rhetorical art?
For rhetorical art?
Rhetorical art, yes.
No, I don't. No, this was like it was a guiding principle at a younger age, but um, I'm always surprised, when somebody picks up on that argument or when I see kind of elements of this in his or her work. But no, this is not a guiding principle. It's the guiding principle is still more so that I look at someone's work in some weird kind of warehouse in Berlin or in such a whatever place and I feel like alienated and frustrated and didn't understand what's going on. So that's more than my preconceived notion of what I felt like a 20-year-old.
Thank you. The next question is from an anonymous audience member, and they say, I appreciate the value placed on curiosity and growth throughout this talk. On a perhaps separate note, could you speak to the finances of starting a gallery and to continuing one for decades? What key values have guided you? What key practices?
Well, that is definitely a longer, let's say in a nutshell, I think me and many of my colleagues who are roughly the same age, we started with pretty much nothing. Absolutely no private wealth, no private anything. And due to the friendship that we had with our artists and certain maybe collectors and certain critics and certain museum folks that also started at that time, we were able to kind of grow up, so to speak. And then financially, it was, to me, for me at least, very important to do some secondary market operations. So I was able, with borrowed money, to buy collections or buy kind of prominent artworks that I thought were undervalued. And then I sold this, within a period of time to, finance my moves from either Soho to Chelsea or from within Chelsea and so on and so on. So the secondary market, by buying artworks on the secondary market, it definitely helped me to kind of be flush enough to grow. Also flush enough to kind of buy back my own artists when I felt that work has been undervalued. So those things kind of like developed into a secondary market model, and it helped stabilize sometimes primary artwork or primary works that I felt needed support. What else can I say about? I mean, but it doesn't come from a particular kind of, wealth management perspective. I didn't have any of that, and most, like Gavin Brown, didn't, and so on and so on. We were relatively poor. And then, yeah, you start continuing this, and then eventually you have to have other people that obviously do this much better with taxes and estate planning and financial statements and all that stuff. I'm not a finance dude, so I needed to hire someone who's doing that for me. You have to professionalize your job, so to speak. I'm good with the art, but I'm not a particular business-driven person. I just know when I fail, and that's when I have to change course.
Thank you for that answer, Friedrich. The last question is going to be from Fong. I'll let you unmute, Fong.
Thank you, Magli. Thank you, Lilly. Thank you, Friedrich. How generous, how amazingly generous and open your question, your stories. And I must admit that when I first came to New York, it must have been also one of the few shows I show was in October I think 88. It was a show of Richard Serra and Bruce Nauman. Friedrich, could you believe it? In those days, you can talk to the great Leo Castelli, which I did. I came up and introduced myself quickly, and I said to him, Mr. Castelli, how do you manage to sell these works of art? It seemed impossible to have anyone among private collectors to house them. Did you manage to sell any of them? He said, no, not whatsoever. And he continued, in fact, it went on a good decade where Richard Serra only sold 3 drawings and 1 small sculpture, and Bruce Nauman none. And so I asked, so how do you manage to continue to support their work? He said, I sold almost everything Jasper Jones ever made. Same thing applied to James Rosenquist. Roy Lichtenstein was the king, and Robert Rauschenberg could somehow be in that mix. So I took the money and support Nauman and Sarah for the whole decade, where I provide paying the rent, money for materials, and stipends. And that's something that it stayed with me forever. So I want to ask you, by the way, I'm very delighted that you start without nothing. Like I have similarly with the rail. And it stay free, as you know. It's very challenging, but from the beginning, I know the funding will come from the made object, the visual culture, because you can live and enjoy it, it enrich your life. You can't do that with a poem, a dance, a theater, duration or time-based work. So that's what we've been doing. We take that funding and support the experimental culture, which is fleeting ever since I came to New York City. That's another story together. Go back to asking the very concrete question to you, is that were there been artists who you couldn't place the work in private collection or institutional, but you place it, but you believe in the work and you support them through the thick and thin?
Yeah, we've done this. And I mean, we continue. Now we can do it actually better on 25th Street because we have more opportunities there. And this is, I think I alluded to this with a move from 18th to 22nd, 25th Street, because now we can actually do programs and that are commercially, let's say, more challenging. Samson Young, I don't know if you saw that show. He's an artist from Hong Kong who
Mm-hmm.
took on the large space actually and performed in for 5 weeks every day, 8 hours inside that space. There was hardly anything for sale. But I continue to support. He has a show at the moment at SF MoMA.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the outstanding artists, I think, of our times. I wouldn't have been able to do this probably in my old space, and he's not an artist you can show on the Uptown. You don't have an audience in Uptown at an Uptown gallery, so for that type of stuff. So I think in general, I think the art world has become more conservative. You know, this Castelli model that you just explained is still very relevant to me, but I'm not sure if anybody else or many other people in my in my field would want to adhere to that model of using 4 or 5 artists and then support like Bruce Nauman and Richard Serra for that matter. But yeah, it's like we have more flexibility now than we used to, and also in Berlin, you know, the overhead we have in Berlin is much smaller than here in New York. We also have 2 floors, if not 3, in Berlin. We can do all kinds of film screenings and film artists that we do in the ground stairs in the basement. And we wouldn't be able to do this, you know, upstairs. So. But you have to be more flexible than you used to be when the rent wasn't as high, you know? So 50 years ago, when I came, it was, my first gallery cost me maybe $1,250 a month
Mm-hmm.
in rent. And when Stefano closed, I didn't have the extra $1,250 to take over his space next door. I simply couldn't afford $2,500.
Yeah.
That's real. That was 1994 or 5 or something like that.
Yeah.
All of this is like a joke compared to what we have to do here in Manhattan these days. And other art dealers tried it in Brooklyn. It didn't work out. Then the Lower East Side. Then, you know, everybody tried all kinds of stuff. But New York has so many different cultural offerings. You have to be in the hub. You have to have you have to be part of a certain gravitational pull.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid that, you know, Harlem didn't work out for Gavin eventually as a location because it's not enough of a pull.
Yeah, I agree. What about signing on with my late friend Joy Pensato in 2007? How did that happen? Because as soon as you gave Joyce a show, she rose to her stardom so fast. She created amazing rupture in painting culture, and that few years follow. How did that happen? Who introduced you to her work, and was there any specific contact, or you've been following her work for a long time?
No. I mean, I knew of her work because of Charlene von Heil and Christopher Wool.
Mm-hmm.
I did do a studio visit with her in the mid 90s or so. I didn't see the forest for the trees. I have to commit, you know, I thought it was, you know, I mean, this also speaks about the arrogance or ignorance that an art dealer sometimes brings, the preconceived notions of what constitutes a coherent artwork. I didn't see the forest for the trees. I also think it's bullshit if I fooled around here. No, I didn't see it. I didn't grow up with kind of that type of language of comics and cartoons and stuff like this. I thought it was funny, but not funny enough. I didn't see it. Many years later, I think it was 2002, 3, 4, I read I mean, it's really kind of unusual. In Art in America, I saw a 4 or 5 spread on this artist that I kind of remotely remembered I had visited 5, 6, 7 years before. And I called Charlene and I said, like, can you give me the address? Because I'm really mesmerized. I look at this and I think I was totally dead wrong. I mean, I need to meet that woman again. I'm now on my own. I want to get over there. And so we hopped in the car, Sam, Sao, and I. And it was, you know, her studio was over I don't remember, Olive Street in Brooklyn. Olive Street. I remember
Olive Street in Williamsburg, yeah.
And she had like, you know, the studio had holes in the roof and pigeons are pooing everywhere and all that stuff. And I was floored. And I had to tell her, it's like, I've been here 10 years earlier or 8 years before, and I didn't see it. And I apologized profusely. Would you like to join my gallery? Because I was deadly wrong, dead wrong. You're doing something, to hark back on what I tried to say before. You're so unique. There's no one doing anything like you. You are unique in your field. And I saw by then also a paint application that was way more serious and way more, almost enigmatic. It was not funny at all. It was quite the opposite of what I had read before.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a good example of where an art dealer completely fucked up first and then apologized later, and we took it on. And I miss her up until today, because she always came to the gallery with that incredible sense of fun and not competitiveness, but really like, this is a fucking great show. I love this. It didn't matter was what on the wall. She loved everything.
It's so true. Thank you for your honesty. I mean, by the way, our perspective of the visual culture is that everyone counts, Friedrich. The artists make the works. They need a platform to show the work, which is where the galleries comes in, and then the collector base, and then hopefully institution would appeal to thinking about purchasing. But it all began with rereading this book, the Kahnweiler book.
Kahnweiler, oh my Lord, my God.
1963. And so this is episode 18. So we're just happy that you came and confessed your story. You make good start.
Not big secrets, yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, it's delightful to have you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Lily. And back to you, Madly.
Thank you so much for that question, Fong. Thank you, Friedrich and Lily. I'd also like to thank Anne Marie, Carolina, and Hannah from Petzel for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd like to thank the Thea Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Camille Awo and Allison Glenn on the occasion of a number of things at Hauser and Worth. And as is Rail tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yes.